So if you just try to Google what capitalism is, you get this definition that it's an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Now, this definition of capitalism is created to differentiate itself from a system that technically was a different version of capitalism called mercantilism, in which trade and industry were controlled by the monarchy or by the state for profit. And the irony is, when you really dive into it, everything that is not defined by private ownership for profit is called socialism today, which is untrue because you're talking about mercantilism. Now, communist states, when they first went out, you could argue, adopted for X amount of time a base version of mercantilism in which the state controlled industry and trade. But that is actually mercantilism. And so if anyone tries to tell you that's socialism when they're going by this definition, you need to tell them, no, you're being ignorant. You're talking about mercantilism, which is what we did between capitalism and feudalism, is all we did is mercantilism. However, that's not the only problem with the definition of capitalism.
What is capitalism? The civilization of mankind can be traced to the establishment of property rights.
Okay, first of all, this is claiming that all of civilization can be traced to property rights. All of civilization can be traced to the agricultural revolution, like 5,000 years ago, which didn't really seem to fully define property rights. Some places kind of had some concept of it, other places didn't. However, you can fully trace what we define capitalism as developing in the Netherlands in the 1600s. Now, what makes that a capitalist country are three things. These three things are the trinity that is the religion that we call capitalism. Capitalism is a religion. People believe in it. People claim that it is the best system that we've ever come up with, that mankind can't create anything better. And this is stuff people say when they are an evangelical of a faith or a hardcore person in a cult. The biggest religion in the entire world is capitalism. It is completely believed as God to half the people. They even have an invisible hand of the market that controls things. As in, they've created a deity aspect to all of this. And if you treat something as a religion, you cannot step back and do critical thinking on it. And so, if the first thing you say is capitalism is the best thing ever, we can't ever think of anything but, well, then you've just closed your down the possibility of ever pondering a better system, and that is utter rubbish. And this video is hogwash on what we keep telling people capitalism is. Okay, the concept of property rights is what happens when you create a constitutional right. Now, if you go back to kind of the forms of modern capitalism, it kind of was able to develop out of people creating constitutional monarchs when they demanded definitions of property rights, when they went out there in mobs and demanded this. It had zero to do with capitalism. It had to do with a mass of people demanding it, forming into groups that we would today call unions to demand these rights from government.
With property rights, individuals could own land, capital, and goods, and then trade or sell them to.
First of all, before a concept of property rights that we would define as today, people could own land. You could have a piece of land and your community could consider that your piece of land. However, later on, a king or a noble could just take it from you, or some Viking horde could come in and just massacre you and take it from you. So, okay, sure. However, people still had property during feudalism. People that were not technically always royals still sometimes had property or buildings.
To others. This economic activity is referred to as the market. This doesn't mean it necessarily takes place in a physical market, it simply means that goods and services are voluntarily traded. For most of human history,
That is just the weirdest statement. There are plenty of places where a corporation comes in and just takes goods from people. Sometimes they displace people. It's actually a horrific issue in huge swath of Africa where capitalistic corporations come in and they just kick people off of their private property and just start mining in a form where we defined it as industrialization, where the state comes in and just starts developing things and dictates things, what they're going to grow, what they're going to do. We define that as industrialization. However, it isn't proper capitalism, and industrialization, as we define it, is just mercantilism. Which we either say, ooh, this is just a before stage, so that's true. Mercantilism is a before stage before modern capitalism. However, when we don't like it, we then claim it's socialism.
property rights have been limited to those in power. For example, a king or lord had ultimate control over those who lived under their protection.
Sure, before you had constitutional monarchs and you had dictatorial monarchs, they could do this. However, it depended on the area. A lot of times the monarch didn't have that much power, and there were guilds and nobles who controlled huge amounts of power. It depended on how powerful he was, how much military force he could pretty much do in a feudalistic state. So that's great that you are just defining a dictatorial monarch, monarch who has complete control, versus a constitutional monarch.
If the king desired beets, farmers were to farm beets.
First of all, we go into countries all the time and we demand people start growing this crop. We've done it all throughout capitalism, where we've gone into places. Even today, we go into places and say, you must grow cotton and you must sell it to us. It is still an act, and we define that as mercantilism traditionally. However, we also call that, once again, industrialization. So we still do this stuff, we just give it different names, and we say, oh, that country's just industrializing. This is just their growing pains until they can develop into a proper modern capitalistic state, which we just lie and say it's this. So once again, everything about this video is mistruths. They take the concept of the Constitution, which in the United States, the Constitution is supposed to be one of the most loved aspects. We are supposed to view the Constitution as a gift almost from God, or some people literally think It's divinely inspired. And they're claiming that our Constitution, oh no, 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 everything about our Constitution that makes it great, oh no, no, that's capitalism, which is untrue. If you want to go back and hear our mythology, we define our Constitution as this amazing document that clearly define these rights. And then our Constitution, with our concept of democracy, spread throughout the world and defeated the old version of basically mercantilism, monarchy, capitalism. That is the story we tell people. And so you take this video and it's literally just completely discounting our Constitution. This video is claiming that it's not our Constitution that made us great, it is capitalism, which is just horrific. This should be considered one of the most anti-American movies of all time because it's taken away the value provided by our Constitution and claiming that no, it isn't an American thing, it's just a capitalistic thing. It has nothing to do with how our founding fathers created a constitution, clearly defined these rights. No, none of that matters. It's just capitalism. So they are completely, utterly trashing American history, the good parts of American history. You can point out all the bad parts, but our Constitution and how it was defined allowed us to become later on the country we are today, which is better than the country we started off with. And it was trying to define individual rights a certain way. And in that, we defined property rights a certain way, which provided these freedoms. It has nothing to do with capitalism. And if you are an American proud of that heritage, this video should tick you off. You should scream at the top of your lungs. No, that is our Constitution. It has nothing to do with capitalism. And it is a perversion to equate the two as the same, which they do all the time. It literally trashes the most beautiful aspects of our history. The Constitution.
If the Lord needed horseshoes, blacksmiths forged horseshoes. Ordinary people had the ability to trade among themselves, but those in power could direct their production if they so desired, or punish those who resisted.
Once again, there are plenty of corporations that go in and completely force people to grow a certain crop or mine, and then if they don't do it, they punish them. And once again, we call that, oh, that country is just industrializing. And it pretty much is the history of Africa, that they're stuck in a mercantilism system dictated by corporations.
The emergence of capitalism changed this. Capitalism is mass production of goods to satisfy the needs of the greatest number of people.
Oddly, I think that is a socialist definition. That's weird. I mean, trying to produce the most amount of good to satisfy the greatest number of people. Is that not like the socialist communist manifesto aspect? Did this video not just steal an aspect of socialism with this? They've rewrote it in a certain way, but sorry, that is literally what socialists have been saying, and you've now claimed that motto as capitalism. So, I mean, okay, keep going. Define capitalism as every buzzword that is positive right now.
Capitalism was revolutionary by recognizing property.
Once again, our Constitution triggered, well, the revolution allowed the United States to develop the Constitution, which recognized property rights for all citizens. Except for, like, well, unless you were, like, later on, eventually. Okay, I don't know if you could claim that right at our founding, because women didn't have property rights like they did today. Eventually, what we view as modern day property rights had its inception in our Constitution. So they've taken our revolution and claimed capitalism did it, and it was not the Revolutionary War that fought against mercantilism of the Brits.
Rights for all, regardless of background and social standing. Under capitalism, even the most vulnerable in society had an absolute claim to their own labor and property.
No, that's still, once again, dude, they're just lying. They're taking what a constitution does. Without a constitution and a government, none of this happens. You can go in and you can look at any country that is either weak or doesn't have a proper constitution, and basically a capitalistic corporation does the exact opposite, which once again is mercantilism, modern day mercantilism acting out. When a company goes and creates a bunch of sweatshops and forces them to produce shirts, and just shirts, and that's the only job you can get in that whole area, is you can have a job, but it's just going to be making these shirts in these factories, and that's the only thing you can choose to do, because that's what the government's literally dictating is mercantilism, and they keep claiming it's industrialization.
It did not guarantee equality of property, but capitalism eliminated any right by anyone else to infringe upon it. In doing so,
how many people have owned farms and a corporation comes in? How many ranchers have a pipeline through their property that they didn't want because a corporation decided they wanted a pipeline there? So this is not true. There are plenty of places where other business interests come in, and growing up in rural western places, there are plenty of places where mines come in and they take land and they steal the water and they leave nothing.
capitalism empowered consumers, rather than those in power, to influence what was produced in the economy. This happens via the profit mechanism. If enough people demand a good, and it can be sold for more than it costs to produce.
Okay, and this is Econ 101 here. And if you go to college and you go to economics, this is where you get basically the Sunday school version of capitalism, where they tell you these fairy tales of like the perfect way capitalism is supposed to function, yet it never does. This is how it should do, you know? I mean, people should just be able to go out there and demand a good, and then they have it. The problem is that doesn't exist. However, I'm going to argue for a system that I'm defining as ideaism, where you focus on an idea and you develop an economy based on ideas, and this will actually happen, where enough people will see an idea and they will demand or vote for it, and then that will be the thing that people then try to produce, instead of people deciding that this is the most profitable thing to produce for a given area. There are plenty of places where they don't offer you the best. Some goods aren't even sold because it's not profitable, so they give you something else. And there's whole economies in which They dictate this stuff, and those economies are still defined as capitalistic. However, it tends to fall into mercantilism capitalism versus our fairy tale version of capitalism.
Produced, that means the production of that good is profitable. Some of the richest people in the world today have made their money not by appealing to the rich, but by appealing to the masses.
Some of the richest people on the planet have completely dominated an industry and screwed over people, sometimes destroying products that would have been better for dominating the market. I mean, Bill Gates went out and just dominated the market. His computers were not the best. He just dominated the market. His operating system wasn't always the best. However, he forced it to be the only one that worked with most things that were computer or computer related. So he just forced it. It was not the best for the masses, it was what he wanted. And he got powerful enough where he could dictate that this is what he wanted. And until just recently, you were pretty much stuck with Microsoft on a whole host of things. When I was a kid, Apple was not compatible with huge swaths of things, so you were still stuck with Microsoft. Not because it was the best, not because it was the best for the price, it was because Bill Gates dominated an industry. And he then deemed that Microsoft was the only software that was going to be used. So, once again, we have a fairy tale.
Walmart's business model, for example, is geared towards selling goods.
Yeah, once again, you don't go into Walmart and you don't say, you know what I would really like is such and such. Could you guys make this? You don't get to go in there and like write little tidbits of products you want. Walmart decides what it's going to put in its stores. They try to find things people would want, but for the most part, it's not like we voted on this type of pen. No, Walmart has decided that it was going to sell these type of pens or this type of product. We didn't get to vote on it. We didn't get to choose it. There's an occasion where a product that's not in Walmart is popular enough that they will then start selling it in Walmart so that their competition doesn't make money. But for the most part, Walmarts just dictate what they're going to sell. They dictate what other people are going to produce. And it has zero to do with the consumers. So once again, another fairy tale is told here.
Cheaply to as many people as possible. Critics of capitalism try to condemn it as greed.
Okay, and that is also untrue. What Walmart has done is go into an area and sell everything cheaper than what other people can do, and they drive out business. And once they drive out enough business, then they get to kind of fix prices. And there are many prices in many Walmarts that are far from the cheapest. However, they fixed a price and there's no one else that will sell that good, so then they get to dictate a price. So then what they do is they don't give you a product for the best price. They give you a product at the price that they think you will actually willingly pay time and time again. That's what they do. They try to figure out how to get as much profit. It isn't an equation of I'm going to have this product produce at this. No. They have a product and they try to get a price where you will actually buy it. And sometimes they play with it. And they're not the only one. Go on Amazon and just start picking products and the price bounces around a lot. You'll have a price go $50. And if people will buy it at $50 more, then they sell it to people at $50 more. And if they can sell it at a different price, and so they're not trying to give you a product at the best price. They're trying to figure out which price point more people will buy it at. So they're not going to sell you something that they'll make a $20 profit on. if they convince people that it should be $50. If enough people buy it at a $50 rate, they will hold the price at $50. If not enough people are buying it at that $50 rate, they'll drop it $10. They'll drop it sometimes really cheap. And you see these price bouncing all the time on Amazon because they're trying to figure out the price point that you'll still buy a bunch at. If you see it and you think it's too much, you're not going to buy any at all. So they play with numbers all the time. And it is nothing to do with offering you the good at the cheapest possible price. They're trying to figure out which price to make the most money that you'll still willingly buy it at.
This is false. Greed and envy are human vices, and they exist in any economic system. What capitalism does...
Now, sorry, if you figure out that people will buy something that costs you $20 to produce at a $200 price point, they're going to sell you at that $200 price point, even if they will make a huge profit just selling it to you at $40. No. They will hold it at that $200 price point if you actually are convinced that it's a decent price at that. They do that all the time. They make as much profit from you that they can. They try to figure out what price you'll still buy it at. Not the best, the highest that you still will buy it. They try to find what price they can hold it that to maximize their profit that you will still actually buy that product at. That's it.
is incentivize the production of goods and services that people desire on the market, rather than leaving those decisions to powerful individuals.
Once again, no, the powerful individuals are dictating this all the time. The high-ups at Amazon created algorithms to try to figure this out. People a long time ago set prices and would sit on it, and they would dictate this price if they develop a large enough monopoly. Walmart dictates that price. If they go too high and you don't buy it, that's when they play with the numbers. However, they're sitting there doing what this guy's doing all the time. This is some weird fairy tale that they're feeding you.
Or governments. Throughout human history, we have seen property rights and markets lift billions of people out of poverty everywhere in the world.
Okay, untrue. Untrue. You can go around the entire world. You can go back to like the 1820s, the 1850s. People were living in slums. People were living 10 people to a one-bedroom apartment in slums in New York. Gangs of New York try to show you the level of poverty people were living at during that time period, where people lived in hovels. There are actually people who dug down and lived in like little holes. That was kind of rare and taken to the extreme in that movie, but people lived horribly for the longest time in capitalistic America. People were packed into cities just as slums, living in slums, getting paid nothing. However, there was something that happened. Labor started going out and demanding things. The labor movement happened. It turned into unions. And when you have a large enough labor movement in a capitalistic country to push back, you get all these things. But if a country hasn't had a labor movement, then you're stuck, getting nothing, living in slums, working in sweatshops.
Property and economic freedom are correlated with improved quality of life, health, and life expectancy. Capitalism is a peaceful system of collaboration between producers and consumers.
Okay, explain how that works out in all the horrific areas where corporations go in and do like blood diamonds, or the horrific conditions where people enslave basically people today in mines for multinational corporations. Seriously, go out and look at all the slums and explain how that is the most peaceful system ever. Because this is a fairy tale they've told you. And if you buy into the fairy tale, you cannot develop a better system. And there is a better system than this.
And functions by the wants and needs of the greatest number of people. The government plays no role in a truly capitalist system. When the government interferes and forces regulations on
Okay, this statement means there has never been a truly capitalistic system. So this is the same thing that capitalists rail against socialists against. And this is just utter rubbish. You have to have some kind of government for a market to actually have rules. You have to have regulations in a marketplace that set up clearly defined rules to actually have that market function properly. I mean, if you don't have this, you have kind of a black market. I mean, the perfect market that they're talking about is black markets, where you have zero government control. We call those all around the world black markets. That is, so anything that's a black market is a pure capitalistic market by this definition.
producers and consumers, it ceases to be a capitalist system. Capitalism is freedom of consumer choice.
Once again, what? I mean, seriously, go into Walmart and demand that they sell you something that's not there. You can't. However, there could be a system where you could try to vote for what you want. Someone could offer up an idea, and you could say, I want that idea. If there's any way possible that someone can make that idea, I want that. We could create a system that would do that.
What if
So, once again, fairy tale. However, there's a system that can do all that kind of stuff that they claimed. And it's called ideaism. And you could do it today. You could have a system where I could present an idea, and it could be on a platform like this one, where I go there and I say, I have this idea, and I present it. And because you create a platform that acts like a copyright protection, then once that idea is out there, some aspect of that idea belongs to me. And then someone else can look at that idea and think, oh, maybe you should do this, this, and this, and they could improve on that idea. And if that becomes what is the end product, then those ideas that added to the first idea would become a percentage of the worth of it. And then if someone came and said, okay, that's a great idea. However, you need to market it this way, or you have to do this to get it out to consumers. Well, guess what? That's another idea that then adds to the profitability of the first idea. And then if you go there and someone owns a factory and says, well, we can produce your idea, and this is how we can do that. And then you have the workers using their minds to produce it. All these things are collections of ideas that give you something of value in the end. And even my video, if you take this as value, this is an idea given to you. And so, what happens is, if I get enough ad revenue, then I'll make a percentage of it. However, we have other systems of like Patreon and whatnot where people are presenting ideas all the time and people are giving them money. So there is a new system, and it's not capitalism. It's an idea system. It is a system where people have ideas and people find worth in those ideas and they profit from those ideas. So we can have a system based off of ideas, and it's already emerging. We don't have to stick with capitalism. And this would actually create a meritocracy, what we claim capitalism does, where people actually profit from their ideas, their thinking, their worth, even from their physical labor more. If I have an idea for like a new pair of shoes, and someone tells me, oh, you need to do this, this, and this to make your idea better, then now we have a collaboration of two individuals for something as simple as like shoes. And then we go and we present this to you the viewer. And you guys think, oh, this is a great pair of shoes. Nobody has done it this way. And enough of you people say, I want it, I want it. You could literally start pre-ordering these ideas in a place like YouTube, or you could just vote saying you want this kind of stuff. And so we don't need capitalism to actually dictate products to us anymore. We can present these products to you, the viewer, and you could literally try to vote or pre-order them, and then we can stop dealing with what capitalism is, which is a bunch of middlemen taking their cut from an idea, or they rip off an idea, and then they present it to you how they choose to for the most amount of profit. We do not have to be in this system anymore. We can have a new system. And sorry, I don't define it as socialism. It's definitely not capitalism. There's no other isms that have tried to do an idea-based economy where it isn't the product necessarily, it is the idea that you try to produce. And you try to then give some value to the persons or persons that help develop that idea or help produce that idea. And that is what I'm arguing for here. Stop believing in this false religion of this perfect economy that they claim capitalism is. Come with me down a road to a new system based purely on ideas. What has made us a civilization is a collection of ideas built off of, improved by other people with other ideas. That is all civilization is. So it's about time, now that we have the internet, now that I can present things via YouTube, that we go to an idea-based economy. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful night.